Well, in grade 4, my teacher gave us an art assignment, and it was for fire prevention. And we had to draw some sort of picture that would enhance fire prevention consciousness. And so I engaged in this very passionately and worked on my Bristol board for weeks, as did the rest of the class. And my artwork was selected to go to a larger forum and competition. And I received a prize for my fire prevention poster. And various students from different school districts came to a dinner. My parents came to dinner, and I wore a tie, and I got a plaque. And this was my introduction to this notion, to this thought, to this fantasy. I could be great. I could be a great artist. And you know, we get these, 9 years old, and I'm thinking, I'm painting chapels, and you get all these. So that notion of doing something significant visits us all. And so whether it's the fantasy of becoming a rock star, or being a part of the NHL, or a fashion designer, or a riveting author, we all have these thoughts that maybe, just maybe, I could be great. Now, we learn quickly that we ought not to talk that way. It sounds conceited, it sounds arrogant, it sounds very self-serving. And so we clothe that, and we kind of cover that, but it's still there. It's still there. And so we may talk in terms of our business success, or our place in the honor roll, our position on the team. In some cases, it's our land holdings. It might be a position in the company, a ranking we have in the organization, the number of degrees after our name, our address in the community, or what particular community we're a part of, our position in the church, the kind of car we drive, where our cabin is located. These are these metrics of success that we learn to be a little bit more subtle in how we communicate them, but they're part of our CV, part of our resume of success and importance and significance. And we all do this. Don't look at me that way. I know you do it too, and you get it. And if by some crazy chance you don't, one day it will visit you. Pride will rear its ugly head and bite you. And we all have these thoughts and fantasies about what it means to be great. And so in the story that Dan just read for us, it was another reminder of how this pumps through our veins. And so in this story, James and John, they come to Jesus like children, and they say, Jesus, just say yes. Just say yes. And Jesus says, well, what's the question? Just say yes. And they're waiting for a positive answer. And so Jesus, well, what is it? Well, it's nothing big. We just want the 2 most prestigious positions in the kingdom. That's all. Just say yes. And Jesus says, well, do you know the path is going to be marked by pain and suffering? Yep, we're up for that. Yep, bring it on. We're good. Just give us those 2 top positions. And when the other 10 hear about it, they're ticked off. They're fit to be tied, likely because they didn't think of it before James and John did. But at any rate, Jesus teases out this story for them. And in verse 42, he says, Jesus called them to him and says, you know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. And here he's speaking of a kind of domination, sort of coercive power, a manipulative power, even an abusive power, because their mental models of leadership went to the warrior kings. General Maximus. This was the power of Rome, and this is the power of surrounding nations and their city-states. And so when they thought of greatness or great ones, they would have gone to these kinds of larger-than-life figures. And he says, when you think of leadership, when you think of greatness, mega, when you think of that, you think of these kinds of leaders. But I love this. He says, but it shall not be so among you. I'm going to give you a different paradigm. I'm going to give you a different way to think about this. This is going to be counterintuitive, countercultural. He says, but whoever wants to be great, megas, among you must be your servant, your house servant. The word here is diakonos. But then he says, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. Here it's doulos. Here it's slave or bond slave. And he says, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. And so here, Jesus says to him, I'm going to give you a different paradigm, a different way of thinking, which this goes against everything that is in your wiring, impacted, of course, by the fall. He says, you want to be significant? You want to be great? You've got to be a house servant. In fact, I'm going to take it even to another level. You're going to have to be like a slave. Now, throughout the rest of the New Testament, we have John, Peter, James, Paul, all being referred to as servants or bond slaves of Christ. And likely what they were thinking back to was the teachings given to us in Deuteronomy chapter 15 as it related to slaves. Yes, the ancient Hebrews had slaves, not the kind of slaves where you own body and soul as has been the case in some nations throughout history. But in Deuteronomy chapter 15, this is what it says in verse 12. It says, if your brother, a Hebrew man, so it could be a neighbor, a Hebrew woman, a Hebrew man, sold to you, he shall serve you 6 years. And so if they sell themselves to you because of economic difficulty, because of owing a debt, whatever it may be, and they serve you for 6 years, but in the 7th year you shall let them go free. And when you let them go free from you, you shall not let them go empty-handed. You shall furnish them liberally out of your flock and out of the threshing of your floor and out of your wine presses. As the Lord your God has blessed you, you shall give to him. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, for the Lord your God redeemed you. Therefore I command you this today. And so here the picture is this. If someone owes you, they're in debt to you, and they sell themselves to you as a slave, they can serve you in that capacity for 6 years. But at the end of that 6 years, you have to let them go. And when you let them go, you don't let them go empty-handed. You furnish them, you equip them, you resource them. You give them livestock, you give them resources, you give them food. Why? So that they don't have to sell themselves back to you again or back to somebody else because of their economic difficulty. So you resource them. You get them back on their feet, and then they're free. But the next verse says this, but if he says to you, I will not go out from you because he loves you and your household, since he's well off with you, then you shall take an awl and put it through his ear into the door, and he shall be your slave forever. And to your female slave, you shall do the same. And so if in the occasion, this person, this individual, so loved the family, and you love them, and they say, you know what, I don't want my freedom. I'd like to stay right here if that's okay with you. And they say, fine. Let's put your ear up in the wall, and we're going to drill a hole into it. And this then bonded you to that family. You are now bonded to them. You are a bond slave. And now for the rest of your life, you are a willing slave, a person who chose slave. This isn't like a servant where you go to the labor board, you quit. But you're relinquishing rights, and you're saying, I am going to serve you because I love you. And this is the image of a bondservant and a bond slave. And Jesus gives us this kind of a model and this kind of language in this passage to drive home this counterintuitive, countercultural kind of image and understanding of what it means to be significant and what it means to be great. Jesus here tells us greatness is not found in position or authority. And we're not reducing positions of authority. That's not the objective. He's just simply saying that's not the litmus test. That's not the metric of greatness, position of authority. Greatness is not measured by some sort of external indicators of success. Rather, by way of contrast, greatness is found in selfless servanthood, even in sacrificial servanthood, because this is how Jesus led. When we prayed just before the service, Cody was praying Philippians 2, and how have this mind in you, which is also Christ Jesus, who didn't conceive and see equality with God as something to be tenaciously held on to, but he emptied himself and became a servant for us. That's what Jesus did. He became a slave to purpose. And he became a sacrificial lamb for our sake. He came to serve. What does a servant do? They meet needs. They don't always meet our wants, but they meet our needs. And this is what Jesus did for us. Our greatest need, that of course, being our disconnected, severed relationship with God. That's what servants do. They see a need and they meet a need. Well, that's the text. That's the story. And I hope that's not a new virtue to you. But I want to take a few minutes and tease out some application here. Because in these last 3 weeks, we've been talking about our mission as an institution. That we want to call students to seek the kingdom of God, be Christ-centered. And we want to be profoundly shaped by the scriptures, anchored to the Bible anchored. And we want to be formed spiritually and intellectually for lives of service. Not so much vocational service, though I certainly hope and pray that many of you go into vocational service or bivocational or strategic, significant contributions to the advancement of the mission of the church. But that's not even what the mission says. It just means committed to a life of serving, to a life of meeting needs, not always meeting wants, but meeting needs. And this is modeled for us in Jesus. And so I want to identify 2 areas of application this morning that again, your homework will be to converse about this. Your homework will be to talk about this. Your homework will be to tease this out in your own life, because we all have mental models and values and perspectives which are unbiblical. And we know the biblical language, but we still think in unbiblical ways. So here's the first one that I want to stimulate some conversation. Your calling is a way to serve, but not the only way to serve. Your calling is a way to serve, but it's not the only way to serve. And so let me just talk about that for a moment. We talk a lot about calling here. Finding what God is leading you to teach or to lead or to problem solve or to create, to manage, to help. Whatever, and we want to help you come up with a sense of mission, a sense of life calling, a sense of purpose in your life. And that's a part of our mandate, it's a part of our goal, part of our objective. But sometimes we become so focused on our call that it becomes our exclusive venue for service. Now, if your primary goal is achievement, if your primary goal is to see certain outcomes resulted in your work, then focus is proven over and over again to be your key. We know that people who accomplish things in life, whether they're Olympians or business individuals or leaders, the more they can focus their energy, the more results they'll see. We know that to be true. But life is more than just outcomes. It's about inner transformation. It's about character. And so being a servant is all about perspective and mindset and attitude and disposition. It's a virtue. And so yes, your calling, the call that God has in your life, is a venue to serve, but it's not the only way to serve. So let me just give you a real simple illustration. Linda and I were involved in church planting for 8 years in Winnipeg. And if you've ever been in a church plant, you know that everybody does everything. And so you've got board members who are setting up chairs and taking down chairs. And you've got worship leaders who are folding the program. And you've got ushers who are praying with people after the service. And everybody takes a turn cleaning the washrooms. And everybody does everything. And so there's no junior high teacher this morning. Guess what? You told me you're doing the class. And it sometimes was just that simple. Because you just had to have a disposition of service. If it's going to happen, we don't have a team. So step in. There's the need. You see the need, you fill the need. And so calling is important. If you hear me reducing that value, you misunderstand. I'm simply saying that do not restrict your life with that narrow focus, because there are times God will say, here's a need. Meet the need. Serve the need. Serve the person. Serve the need of the moment. And this is the part of the way God shapes our lives and grows us into sacrificial, selfless servants. So truly, your calling is a way to serve, but it's not the only way to serve. So as it relates to objectives and accomplishment, focus. But as it relates to character, And as it relates to extending a platform of influence, be a servant. And don't be ever too important to stack a chair or clean a washroom. A second question I want to stimulate your thinking with is this. Disassemble your cultural conditioning as a consumer. You know, we live in this cultural context, and over the last number of generations, we are afforded so much privilege and choice, so much opportunity and choice. Let me take you back 500 years ago. 500 years ago, who did you marry? Somebody within a 4 or 5 kilometer radius, right? She may be your second cousin. She may have straight teeth. He, on the other hand, he may be bald. He may be 20 years older than you. But that was your pool of option. Look around. Eh? Look around. This is where this is a gift, okay? To have the opportunity to choose friends and to engage in the options we have in our world. But 100 years ago even, to go to the store, if you're in a rural context and you needed flour, you bought flour. Now you can get almond flour and gluten-free flour and rich flour and white flour and all these different guys. Go to get some toothpaste. It's like, where do you start? All these options. And all those options have created within us a consumer disposition, right? And a consumer disposition, the first question they ask themselves is, do I like it? And if you don't like it, you'll go somewhere else where you do like it. And so you go to Five Guys Burger, and you say all the way, and you get all the toppings. And let's say you go to Five Guys and you say all the way, but give me some extra jalapeno peppers and hold the mayo, and you get your burger and you see those jalapenos just dripping off. Everything's dripping on a Five Guys burger, right? But there you see mayo. What were they thinking? What were they thinking? Mayo is on your burger. You said no mayo. Take this back. And we have this conditioning that says, I want it exactly the way I want it. Now again, I'm not talking about, burger preparation and food. What I'm trying to talk about is a disposition we have where the first question we ask is, do we like it? And so when you're finished school here, you're going to go to some church in Grand Prairie. And I've never been to Grand Prairie. I'm sure it's nice. But it'll be some church of 150 people, and they won't stand to read scripture. And they'll sing a song, and then somebody prays, and then they'll sing a song, and then the offering's taken, and Myrtle's playing the organ with her mittens on. And then then somebody will give some other announcements, and then they'll sing another song, and then there's the children's feature, and it's stop, start, stop, start, stop, start. And then the pastor gets up, and he works his way through the text. And you leave there thinking, this is Bush. You won't say it. I hope you don't say it. But you're thinking it because we've been conditioned as consumers. What does Jesus say? He says in verse 43, but it shall not be so among you. You're going to be different. Your first question isn't, do I like this? Your first question should be, can I somehow help here? And we take this consumer mindset into ministry, into our churches, into our places of employment. We take this consumer mindset into meeting our in-laws, into how we look at our neighbors, how we look at our friends, how we look at our spouse. No, I don't like that. When our disposition should be, how can I help? How can I help? How can I serve? How can I meet a need? Now, I want to illustrate this morning. Bill Latrace, come on up here. Many of you know Bill. Yes, obviously many of you do know Bill. Come on up here, Bill. You will see Bill in the dining hall. You will see Bill in the guys' dorms. You will see Bill if there's any sort of, come on up here, you need to go to the mic. If there's a meal being served, Bill will be putting the mashed potatoes on your plate. Bill's always there, and he has been here for decades. And Bill, I don't want to put you on I am putting you on the spot.
Yeah, because I don't measure up.
No, that's your heart. Talk to us. You have this incredible servant spirit. What goes through your mind when you hear about a need, you hear of an opportunity? What goes through your mind? Why are you always there?
If I go by my natural heart, it's too proud and too selfish. Pride, because you're capable of doing it yourself, so why would I do it? Selfishness, because by nature I'm lazy. Or it costs something, time or money. Really what it requires is for me to be close to God, to love Him, and to let Him work in me so that I can serve someone else. The second thing that's required is that I love you. And I do love you. If I'm with you, God shows me areas where there's need. And then if I'm not living by the flesh, I serve the need. Otherwise, I serve myself. And service is not selfish, but giving.
Bill, you certainly modeled that selflessness. When you hear of an opportunity, when you hear of a need, what's the first thing that goes through your mind?
Depends where I'm at with the Lord. Some days I think, why are you asking me? Why don't you go and ask somebody else? But if I keep my heart soft to the Lord, then I say, yes, I'll come and help. I'll be glad to do it.
That's great. Bill, thank you for modeling servanthood for us.